What's up, everyone? Criddle here, and we're going to talk about the update from March 5th. I'm going to wait a couple of days before doing any type of update videos because I don't want to read line to line to line. And then also, in addition to that, where you have patch notes sometimes are different than what actually made it into the game. Sometimes we get things in the patch notes that don't make it into the game. Sometimes we get things that made it into the game that did not make it into the patch notes. And I want to be able to give you all the best information that I possibly can, and we're going to be able to go through it a lot faster. So I'm just going to point out some major things, some of the big things, but you all, if you can come through and read all the bullet points if you want to. First thing I want to talk about is the haste. Haste was was one of those things that made it into the game that did not make it into the patch notes. This was kind of a big issue because haste rating previously gave you 18 haste rating gave you 5.24% haste, whereas now it gives you 1% haste. Basically what they did is they normalized the rating values of parry rating, dodge rating, etc., and haste rating. They made them the same so that 18 of whatever rating gives you 1% of the thing that it says. This is okay to do for everything except for haste, and I think this is where it was kind of overlooked. And according to Joppa, he does feel like the nerf back was swung a little bit too hard on haste, and they're going to be adjusting it hopefully in the future. But basically, it comes down to there's many ways to get dodge rating and parry rating. Those are from agility. There's ways to get crit rating. That's going to be from your dexterity. And then also in addition to that, you can get it from the rating. So there's those ways to get it. The haste, however, you can only get from like a shaman who is already nerfed from 20% down to 15% in a recent patch. So that is one way to get it. And the other way is through haste rating specifically. There's no stat that contributes to haste. So they should not be the same rating, like a 1-to-1 when it comes to the rating. So I think that's part of the issue, is that they were just like, we're going to normalize it. And that just doesn't work when you normalize it that way. Anyway, hopefully that's going to be looked at in the future, and that's that. Going into the actual patch, the Druid was a lot of fun. I've been playing it quite a bit, and I got mine up to about level 13. Going forward, I will be doing a video on each of the classes as they get updated. I was waiting for them to start getting updated to level 40 at least, because the way that you play some of these classes will change significantly when these new skills come in, especially when looking at the Cleric and how the Cleric changes have been made. But even the Druid even the Shaman had a lot of changes to it, and it changed the way that class is played. We're going to be looking at things like items that you want to be looking for, how to play the class, your role in a group setting. Those kinds of things is what we're going to be looking at. So look for the Shaman and the Druid coming soon, the Cleric once it's finished, and then the other classes as they get finished up in the future. That all said, the Druid, like I said, is a lot of fun. It is a good class. It's a very strong class, but it also does have some issues with it. I'll go over some of those issues when I make the video, assuming they don't fix them between now and then. There's a lot of trolling that is happening. If you've been into my stream, you have already seen how to do some of that trolling. It's a bit ridiculous. Please don't do it. It's not nice. Reduce the amount of fog a bit during rainy and foggy weather. This was a huge change. Before we get into all of that, though, some people have come to me and like, why do you hate on the fog so much in the game? I think it's amazing. I hate on the fog so much because when it's done right, it looks amazing and it's awesome, and it creates an amazing atmosphere and ambiance, and it's fantastic, and I love it. But I hate on it because when it's not done right, it is done very, very poorly, and it is terrible, specifically in places like Silent Plains, where it looks like you're swimming in the ocean, and it's awful. With this new update, the fog in Silent Plains did change a bit, and it is a lot better. However, now you have this situation where when it rains in Silent Plains, your entire screen can go pure white for up to a minute before that transition actually goes through, and then you can actually see again. So there's still some tweaks that need to be made. This kind of goes into this down here as well, where we have fog interactions between zones and specific weather types. So they're fixing some of those, they're changing some of those. These are things that still need to be dialed in, but it's nice to see that they are making those changes. Next thing that I want to call attention to is fix some issues at How Near Cave and where NPCs weren't able to path and were stuck evading. I'm sorry, but Visionary Realms, you need to look and reevaluate how you are fixing this because it is not getting fixed. I will go back and I will call out specifically this one update, but it has been fixed in multiple updates. But if we go back to February 21st, you said right here, fixed an issue with mobs sometimes getting stuck evading when spawned, wilds in dagger tails especially. So you specifically called out the wild in dagger tails, and Joppa himself was playing the game. He was playing a druid on March 5th and streaming it, and he ran into a bunch of dagger tails that were still evading, and that has been 2 weeks ago. So please stop putting this in the patch notes if it's not actually fixed, and maybe reevaluate how you are fixing this, because quite frankly, you're not doing it. I don't know what else to say. It's not getting fixed, but it is showing in the patch notes quite often. Moving on, fix an issue where some crafted items would sometimes have higher stats than they were supposed to, specifically Jewelcrafting. So if you don't know about this, basically Jewelcrafting was put in a recent patch, and some of the items were really good. You can get +4 to any stat that you wanted to for any of the jewel slots. You can get like 36 to ratings, really nice items that you could make from this. But there were ways in which you could manipulate the system. It was not a random chance situation, which a lot of people thought it was. You could actually specifically go in and craft these items based on how you were stacking your items in your inventory and then putting those into the craft. That was basically the bug that was happening. And you could make up to +8 to a specific stat, which is insanely powerful in this game. This supposedly fixed that. To my knowledge, it did fix it. You can no longer craft those items. So that is happening. However, those items still do exist, but they were tweaked. So we're going to kind of talk about that down here. So down here, we talk about the attributes of stat items from Jewelcrafting have been slightly adjusted in many different ways, some up, some down, etc. And then also up here, the stat bonuses provided by many dropped accessories have been slightly increased. So we're going to talk about all of that kind of at once. Let's do the ones that have been increased first. So things like the Orc Earring, the Osharuk Necklace have had +1 added stat to them. For the Orc Earring, for example, it was +1 to the strength. For the Osharuk Necklace, it was +1 to stamina. So look at your items, see what kind of stat bonuses you may have gotten. They were very small changes, but they were nice changes either way. The stat changes to the Jewelcrafting, however, were a little bit different of a story. So the +8 items are now down to +6, but they are still in the game, and those are still considered to be the best items in the game if you had them previously, but they're still in the game and they need to be removed completely. So hopefully there's a way to go in and remove those items or adjust those items down to where they should be. But what seemed to have happened is they just said, we're going to remove 25% of the stats on all of those crafted jewelries, because the items that were +4 are now +3. The items that were +8 were now +6. So it doesn't seem to have actually fixed that issue and resolved the people that were able to make those prior. In addition to that, we have slight increases for like the pewter, copper, nickel, silver, minor additional bonuses. So when they took away the one stat, they added in another stat. In this case, it was like bonus 10 health or 10 mana, those kinds of things to those items. So that's what happened basically with Jewelcrafting. It will still be dialed in a little bit more. The jewelry across the board is going to be looked at. And in fact, itemization across the board will be looked at. According to Joppa, he said that he wants to do a stream where he talks to the community about itemization. So that may be coming soon. We'll have to see how that goes. The stability, in interest of stability, they've disabled FSR2. Basically, FSR2 is DLSS for the NVIDIA. This is the AMD version of it. It's supposed to help lower end graphics cards run the games better, but it was causing a lot of issues and a lot of crashing. So if you have, some people were not aware of this and the game was crashing a bunch, so they never turned off that feature because they just didn't know. So they disabled it until they can fix it. So that's what's going on with that. Let's see, moving on. Most of these other issues, as far as I can tell, have been fixed. these issues with the chat has seemed to be fixed. The duplicate abilities have been fixed. The dialogue, clicking yes or no has been fixed on the bindstones, all that kind of stuff. Let's move down to the cleric. This is kind of the last part that we're going to really call out: the cleric here, and then the shaman, and then the NPCs. And then we're pretty much going to be done with all of that. So moving on to the cleric. Previous update added in a lot of cleric abilities, but they did not work right for various reasons, whatever. We're not going to get into that. There was another discrepancy of what the patch notes said was in the patch notes, but did not make it into the game. And again, another reason why I want to wait a day or two before going over the patch notes, because of that kind of discrepancy that is frequently happening. But these new changes to the writ line, the battle line here, I believe is 35 increase to readiness. Readiness feels really good now with a cleric in your group as far as what they contribute. So that seems to be really nice. However, readiness across the board still needs to be looked at, especially for tank classes. It's still a bit clunky, and even more so for the paladin, since they have to wait on readiness and they have to wait for their wrath to. Both of those things, it's just the paladin just does not flow very well. So I see you, paladins. Hopefully you guys get some love soon. I know that tanks are the next to get that love that Joppa has been going through on the priest. Energize now is instant cast. This was 1.5 seconds when it was updated in the previous patch. It is now instant cast, so that is really nice. The main thing I want to talk about here in Cleric, though, is this line right here. I brought this up in Joppa's stream. I feel like it was just kind of glossed over and not taken very seriously, but this is absolutely, utterly overpowered. My friends are going to hate me for calling this out, but I want you all to go out there and abuse this as much as you can in hopes to get it fixed, because I brought it to Joppa's attention. And again, I feel like it was glossed over too much, or it was looked at by what I said. Maybe I misworded it. I don't know. But let's go over this real quick. So Inspire Allies does not seem to increase attack power at all. It doesn't seem to do anything whatsoever for melee classes or anybody doing any type of physical damage. Does not seem to work. Spell power, on the other hand, is getting a major boost. It got a major boost, especially when it comes to dots and hots. Dots are specifically what I want to talk about. Even at the 15 spell power, it was quite a bit. That has now been bumped up to a base of 30. And then because it scales now with player level, when you get up to level 30 to 40 plus, this scaling gets insane, and you can actually kill just about any mob in the game in 15 seconds or less. So basically I would say 20 seconds if everybody puts their dots on it. So if you get a full group with dots and then you hit that button, it's dead in the next 15 seconds. So let's talk about that for a second. Spell power bonus right now is giving you kind of a 1-to-1 ratio increase in damage to the ability that you use. So if you're doing like a nuke on a wizard that's 1,000 damage and you have plus 100 spell power, you're going to do 1,100 damage. That's not a big difference. That's only about 10% difference. However, if you add this to hots or dots, hots being heals over time, dots being damage over time, it adds that to every single tick of the dot. So the spell power doesn't increase the damage by a percentage, it increases it by a 1-to-1 ratio every single time you do damage. So you can see how this can be very overpowered. I'm going to make a video showing this, but I wanted to call it out here as well. Effectively, what this does is it allows for a necromancer, for example, to put up 4 different dots, and then the cleric can hit this ability, and now that necromancer is hitting for an additional 100 to 150 damage on top of their damage every 3 seconds, 4 times, because they have 4 dots. You can stack this with druid dots. You can stack this with shaman dots. You can stack any dot in the game will be affected by this. I think Enchanter also has a dot. If you put a bunch of dots on a mob and then the Inspire Allies gets pressed, it's just going to tick a ton of damage. You're talking about thousands of damage per 3 seconds. So still thousands of damage, 1,000 damage per second on a mob. Anyway, that's basically what it does. I'll show it to you in another video. The base amount healed with Arc of Light has been increased. This feels really good. It basically doubled the amount of healing potential on this AoE, which is fantastic. Our Cleric really loves it, and it helps to top off the group very well when they take some AoE damage or we get a bunch of adds and they're kind of bouncing around for a minute. This Interlocking Stone's mana cost changed to 16 mana flat. This is a good change because I do not like any of the spells in the game that are a % of your base mana. I'm going to use the Druid one for an example because I've been playing Druid recently. They have a spell, the Verdant Seed, which is their shield and then heal spell that they use that costs 30% of base mana. Well, it costs 30% of your base mana when you cast it until you have no mana. Once you have 0 mana, though, you can still cast it once you get like 3. So you have to tick up to 3 mana and you can cast it again and it uses all of your mana. Now, some people are saying, well, maybe it only uses your base of what you currently have. Well, that would be the case if you had, say, 50 mana. It would use, 30% of that, but it still uses, like if you have 100 total mana and you use the spell, it uses 30 mana. If you have 50 mana out of your 100 total and you use it, it still uses 30 mana. If you have 3 mana, it uses 3 mana and you can still use the spell. If you have 20 mana, it uses all 20 of it and still uses the spell. So you can see how that is broken, and it is that way across the board. As far as I know, for every single ability, even when you run out of mana completely, you let it tick up 1 or 2 mana, 3 mana, and you're able to use those spells still, even though they have a flat or they have a percentage that they're supposed to use of the base. So anyway, the point is you can use these basically at 0 mana or close to 0 mana. Last thing we're going to talk about here is going to be the Lieutenants of Greed has been slightly increased. So all of the NPCs related to that, and then some of these NPCs down here have also been boosted up some. This is a very good change. I think we spent over 100 hours trying to get our group these spawns. So trying to get 3 different names to spawn, we spent over 100 hours trying to get 4 people. So we had to get 12 different spawns of those, and it took us 100 hours plus to get 12 spawns of those mobs. We still have 2 people in my party that have not finished that quest. They don't really care to finish it, but it would be nice to be able to finish it, and it's just taking so long to get these mobs to spawn. In addition to that, though, and another factor on top of this is the amount of mobs in an area of this Gadai Fort is way too high. I think there's just so many mobs that are there. It's nearly impossible for a group at level to be doing this area because every single time you pull a mob, you're going to get, 5 or 6 mobs. They're piled on top of each other, and it's very hard to split them. Even if you have a monk at level, their fail rate on Feign Death is too high to be able to consistently pull a fewer number of mobs. You would need to have a monk and an enchanter to be able to pull this area. And then you're not able to do DPS fast enough sometimes. Like, it's just, this area needs to be looked at overall, not just the spawn rate of the names within it. Anyway, I think that's all I'm going to go over here. The gathering was, changed quite a bit, but you guys can all go and read that stuff. So check out the rest of these bullet points. But those are some of the things that I really wanted to highlight out of this patch. Thanks for watching the video. If you like it, please like, subscribe, follow, all that kind of stuff. I do stream every single day over on Twitch. So come over, ask any questions that you may have, and let's chat about the game. See you in the next one. Bye.